Quinn, thanks so much for coming on the Unstacked Startups podcast. Really appreciate having you here today. Quinn, you are an amazing entrepreneur. You have successes under your belt already at a young age, and what you've built is fascinating. Can you explain what is Autumn AI, which you were the co-founder and CEO of, and then I'd love to dive deeper into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to talk about it. So, Autumn AI was a system that we built that ingested voice and text data to measure uh, and understand psychological health. Simply put, what we were trying to build was, the Fitbit for your mind, but in software form. And the idea was that unlike our biological health, where there were all of these ways of measuring how healthy we are and how we're progressing over time, the only tool available in the mental health space was like a self-assessment or survey. And there were just so many challenges with that. It was difficult to measure, difficult to do prevention or track really what works and what doesn't. So, our thesis was what you measure, you can manage. And there just wasn't a good system of measurement.
I'm wearing my Apple Watch right now, and it can track all of your, you know, physical metrics, which are obviously important to your health and everything else, but you've taken a totally different spin on this, the Fitbit for your mind. People have various challenges regarding anxiety or various mental health challenges. How does this predict that? Tell
Mm.
me more.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started as a research effort out of the University of Toronto. I had a close family member and one of my closest friends in high school who had bipolar. And one of the things that they would do is they would use an app to track their mood over time. And it was really, on this scale of 1 to 5, pick the emoji that best represents how you're feeling today. The reason that they were asked to do that as part of their care regimen, the reason it was actually a really critical part of their care was because even just starting to identify when the scores that they were inputting were starting to decrease or increase could be a early warning sign that that trend might continue towards either a manic or a depressive episode. And it's a really simple measure, but it was powerful because people could both start to identify that as their kind of support network. But then for them themselves, they could look at that measurement and say, okay, when I'm in the midst of maybe a high or a low, I can look back and see that it hasn't always been that way, and that I will return to normal at some point. Because when you're in the midst of that, it's hard to remember that you've ever felt any differently. So just the act of measurement itself was so powerful. And then we found, or actually started doing some of the research around um, how language is this incredibly rich source of information about how we feel. And when I say that, it's actually not so much the content. It's not, people talking about, oh, I'm super stressed, or I'm not feeling great, or I'm feeling really good. It's actually more the syntax and grammar. So it's not what we're saying, it's how we're saying it. An easy example of this would be for a long time, clinical therapists have looked at how frequently we use self-referencing pronouns like I instead of we when talking in a therapy session, for example, because it reflects a perspective of the world as happening to you rather than as happening to people, and it's associated with a higher stress state, anxiety, and even depression. And so that's just one signal. But when you start to use like natural language processing and some of these more sophisticated technologies, you can actually begin to process hundreds of different features of language, and no one feature explains everything. If you just think about I or we, you're not going to be able to understand all that much. But if you can look at 100 and you can track how that changes over time, because maybe I just use I more than you do, but if it changes for me from whatever my normal looks like, that starts to be a meaningful signal. And so we built a system that did that. And it turns out that the predictive power of that is incredible. You can actually begin to identify. There was one research study that inspired us, where they took Twitter data, publicly available Twitter data, um, and they built a model around that Twitter data, and they were able to identify early signs of depression up to 6 months in advance of the person actually getting a clinical diagnosis. And those were the early days. And so over the last 5 years or so, the technology has just exploded. A lot of the generative AI now actually helps do better feature extraction and analysis. You get more contextual understanding of what's being said. So it's just an incredible place, and it's Amazon's now launching, as part of their wearable tone detection. Apple is and OpenAI are looking at emotion and then sentiment from language and voice communication. It's a really, really exciting area of study, and there's a lot happening, which I'm grateful for.
I think most of us, you know, either ourselves or family members or close friends have suffered from, mental health challenges. Some of my closest friends, uh, family members have bipolar, and if they can have a tool, a predictive tool, a preventative tool in advance, and maybe you can't prevent, I don't know, maybe you can, and there are different strategies to get in front of it and make the highs and lows less severe. And unbelievable that it's detecting this and making these predictive insights based on language, based on text, based on syntax,
Yeah,
intonation. It's also interesting because there's this topic of conversation in health tech circles where there's this argument that the healthcare systems in the Western world have been largely reactive and coming in at the end and diagnosing something once it's been found. But if you live a proactive lifestyle and get ahead of, there are actually ways to prevent mental health or heart disease, or by exercising, by doing various
right,
things, the way you eat.
right.
And now you can apply this to mental health. But Quinn, maybe a question for you is, this can have, and I assume to some degree is already having, profound, you know, implications, not just for the health of individuals, of families, of friend groups, but like there's so many use cases for this, for you know uh, the experience of employees, of organizations, the performance of teams. Tell me, how else can this be used to benefit groups?
We were really focused on, what are the drivers of some of the common challenges that people face when it comes to mental health or just or emotional health. And if you look at things like chronic stress, the kind of downstream effects of that, heart disease, all these health impacts, it's huge. And so we were interested in that as a space. We were interested in burnout as a space. And what we realized was we had an advisor from the graduate school of business at Stanford, Jeffrey Pfeiffer, and he wrote this book called Dying for a Paycheck. And the whole analysis of the book was that there is this enormous cost that businesses currently bear because they have, employees that are under this constant stress. And so as a result, aren't able to effectively work, and, are more likely to leave. So presenteeism, turnover, there are all these costs associated with that kind of work stress and poor conditions. But because it's difficult to measure that as an organization, it becomes difficult to justify doing anything to avoid that stress. And so, his thesis, like ours, was if it's measured meaningfully, you can actually begin to shape the incentives of an organization to say, look, there is a benefit to not avoiding stress, but creating an environment that doesn't move people from stress to burnout. Because once you hit burnout, you're no longer productive. You're likely to leave. And so keeping people from hitting red. And if you can, as a business, do that, you stand to benefit tremendously in lower health insurance costs, in more productive workforce, and people that want to stay. And you have now this kind of base of knowledge that persists because people aren't churning out so frequently. There are all these benefits, but until there's a really good way to measure that and demonstrate the ROI, as an organization, if you have to choose between some initiative that helps people in a kind of hand wavy way versus something that's going to drive, an investment in your marketing spend that's going to drive a calculable ROI, you're going to take that every day because that is, unless it's a huge part of your culture, the like fiduciary responsibility that you have. So we started getting really interested in that space, particularly because of COVID, because everyone was remote. Burnout was top of mind for everyone, and all of a sudden, the costs were really obvious, even if they couldn't measure them really effectively. So Autumn started focusing on how, in the context of organizations, can you measure and track things like culture, not just when things are going poorly, but also when they're going really well. And can you start to actually measure that over time? Can you build some quantification around it in a way that you can begin to make investment decisions? If I do X, what sort of impact on this measure does it have? Does this initiative that we're running, or does this benefit that we're offering, actually move the needle or not? And we wanted to do this in a really privacy first way because we felt like we saw where the technology was going. We felt like it was inevitable, but that the kind of worst case scenario would be just a big brother monitoring solution that gets introduced to workplaces, and we were already seeing that in some instances. And so we figured, what, this is going to happen. Let's try to be the version of this that really builds it in a way that actually drives business outcomes and helps people without betraying their privacy. So I am, yeah, long on that space. I think we're just beginning to see where it can go.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you on, the practical effects of being able to measure it, the ROI, and then being able to create an incentivization structure where an organization invests in a technology like this. But there's no
Mm,
question the tremendous value, the reduction of turnover, you know, uh, I mean, the increased productivity, the effect on culture,
yeah.
I don't, hard to put a dollar value on it, even if you can get even close to it. That's amazing from an organization perspective, and you're making a meaningful impact on individual people's lives. Um, on privacy, it's an interesting point, right? Do folks want their, all this being tracked or analyzed, or are people going to look down upon them if they're extra
Yeah.
anxious or stressed out, or like maybe just give a brief thought on how you approached that.
I think it's a tricky challenge. But if we look to other technologies, let's take Google, for example. A lot of people are comfortable searching for, incredibly personal things uh, in Google, knowing that it's associated with their unique identifier ID, or, the way that, Google will track your persona over time, because they get value in return. And so our approach has been, we think that people will opt opt in to giving this information if they're getting real substantial value in return. And the job that we have now is to make sure that they're actually getting that value. And then in the context of an organization, the way that the software worked was we never showed individual data. So you would never see, how stressed is Quinn in the context of the org. What you would see is, hey, my product and engineering team is running really hot. We have a major launch that I know we have in the second half of the year, but in H1, it's running really hot, and unless we're able to reset and bring things down so that people aren't close to burnout, I don't know if we're going to be able to make that launch in H2. But that's the kind of level of insight that you get. So you, as a kind of strategic operator, can make that decision, or you can have that insight at a team level. But you're never seeing individual data. It's less a privacy issue and more a how the data is used issue.
So, Quinn, at Autumn, I assume to be able to create such a solution, a technology, you needed to surround yourself with great people that were knowledgeable. And what was your approach in the early innings of building a killer early team?
One thing that was particularly interesting was you would hear, I think, this kind of common wisdom of, find the 10x engineers, or when you like type A people will hire type A people, type B people will hire type C people as you grow the team. And so the most important thing is get the right people early and be ruthless with the quality. And starting Autumn, realized just how true that was. I think an example of this is we had Dr. Serena Jebley. I mean, just with her joining, we went from hypothesizing that this research was possible to building a set of proprietary models that could do this in a way that very few, if not anyone else, could. And the impact of that on the rest of the team was absolutely enormous. All of a sudden, it felt like we went from imagining this future to actually building it. And as a result, we were able to attract people that I think I mean, to this day, I'm amazed that we were able to get on board.
This flywheel effect and the importance of it at an early stage is sometimes I mean, talk about
I
ROI and being able to measure it. It's hard to measure it. It's very difficult. It's difficult in our industry, in the talent industry, and running stacked SP at talent firm for venture backed tech startups. It's
Yeah.
sometimes difficult to put in, numbers.
Our strategy was like, if that's not how the whole team feels, then we're not doing it, because we realized it might be that this person that we're considering to hire is really good and is capable and competent. But if there was not that level of enthusiasm and that sense of like they're not just helping us accomplish a job, but they're adding something more to the team, then ultimately, because of the stage that we were at, it would be more work in the long run to act as the manager that needed to do all the things to set them up for success. Because I think one of the realities of a startup is you are rarely in a position to be a good manager. And so what you need are people that can go above and beyond, um, and execute with that kind of level of autonomy and independence, and not wait for you to tell them what to do.
All right, so you build this early team. These are amazing folks, very talented. They have the qualities of what you need, and they're dedicated. They're smart.
Mm,
You got this pretty amazing, mission and vision that you're trying to solve for. And what happens next? Because my understanding is you are somewhere else right now in terms of where you technically work. I'll let
mm.
you fill us in.
Yeah. So we were we were working on the product. We were looking to raise our next round, and we got approached by not just one, but actually a number of different companies simultaneously. And we initially began the conversations thinking that these might be strategic investors for us as our next round of fundraising, as we look to really scale things. But then one company in particular, Qualtrics, um, yeah, it just became more and more attractive as an opportunity to essentially leapfrog 10 years of work in scaling, to go from the number of customers and early product that we have to global with thousands of customers nearly overnight. So we actually ended up working out an acquisition with Qualtrics. So they ended up purchasing Autumn. And so I now lead kind of our broader AI efforts around agentic AI at Qualtrics, and part of that is taking Autumn and scaling it. And so we're working with them now, and it for us it was a question of um, speed to scale. We also realized that as the area that we felt the technology had the greatest impact and largest market opportunity required a really deep um, relationship with HR. And we realized that there was significant risk to us approaching that sales motion, which was typically quite long for enterprise, without the like established network. And so Qualtrics essentially solved a lot of those problems for us. And so it came, the goal was always to build, a company and IPO it, but the math worked out, and we felt like our chances of success were highest, and we really cared about seeing this through. We wanted this technology to exist in the world. So it was, I think part a business decision and part a kind of mission driven decision. And yeah, now we're at Qualtrics, and the goal is to help them move beyond surveys and provide this sort of measurement and system to every customer they have.
Amazing, and congratulations, Quinn. What being on the forefront of agentic AI, in this context of what you've built at Autumn and what you're doing at Qualtrics, but is there, putting you on the spot here, but is there something that you're particularly excited about as AI becomes smart enough to string together multiple tasks and do things while you're sleeping?
It feels like when generative AI started, really become entering public consciousness with Chat GPT, GPT-2, there was this excitement in the sense that this would be a platform shift, that this would be majorly disruptive. And I think what we've seen so far is it's been really disruptive, but not quite to the scale that everyone thought it would be. It's been incredibly useful for incumbent players, large enterprises to adopt features using generative AI, but um, they have remained features so far. And we're definitely seeing companies that move beyond that. But by and large, the industry hasn't transformed overnight. I think agents are the platform shift that we thought was going to come with just generative AI or with just the kind of large language model improvements. Because at its core, it is a different way of building. Instead of a deterministic, if then, if you get this data, then do this with it. You are now asking an agent to make a decision. What information do you need? Do you need to follow up and get additional context in a technical way or from a user? And then how do you what do you do with that? Take action on that data, that information, that context. And it's hands off. And that is just such a different way of building from an architecture perspective to the way that we think about interfaces, right? When everything we've built in modern software, statically serves you information, but now you have the opportunity for a truly personalized experience. I think it's transformative. But what agents actually make possible now is personalization at scale. If you think about something like an airline, you might have 17,000 support staff to get on calls, help people with their luggage and their booking and flight changes and all of that. And you might have a couple of those staff that are there for 10 years and become really, really amazing at what they do. They know what works, what doesn't. They understand and can start solving problems proactively for people because they know, what, in that destination, flights are sometimes late. Let me recommend a different itinerary. That's the sort of learning that you get over many years. And but what I think changes with agents is instead of those learnings accruing to one person over time, you now get those learnings accruing from every interaction to an agent that can serve everyone. And so instead of it taking 5-10 years to get to this incredible person who can support people in all of these ways, you have an agent that is capturing all of those learnings and able to improve everyone's experience in all these ways. And I just think that is a unbelievable shift in what is possible. So I'm excited, if you can tell.
I can tell. I echo the excitement. I mean, you mentioned it's going to change the way we build. I completely agree. I mean, you think about a go-to-market function, and the various different elements of a go-to-market function, and having agents act and do the activities and learn from it and spread the learning to the entire team. Or for us, in the context of stacked search partners, of course, we
Mm.
have our go to market function and, helping startups hire. And on the flip side, we, proactively are looking for amazing talent to be able to recommend to our partners, and agentically to be able to decipher who's the best and to spread the learning to the recruiting team and the efficiencies through the process. It's a transformation that we're going through right now, as it sounds like you are driving at Qualtrics, and I think the smart organizations are going through at the moment. So,
The one other thing I'll add is, part of what I love about working in a startup environment is you can have individually such an impact on what you're building and the customers you're serving, and every person in the startup feels like they're really moving the needle, or at least I hope they do, right? That's the goal. Um, I think what this new paradigm of building makes possible is you can keep that size of team. You can build where everyone has that feeling because now they're equipped with agents that help them have that impact. And I think we're going to start to see organizations um, that really focus on quality talent above all else, because a 10x person with a suite of agents becomes a 100x person.
so Quinn, you've been on this journey for quite a few years now. If you think about those threads, are there traits of successful founders that come to mind?
I've been thinking about this a lot because first, after doing the first startup, just reflecting on the learnings, and then two, kind of now working with founders and investing in them. Um, it becomes there's this incentive to figure out the answer to that question. There are definitely a number of things that I feel like have made or become clear as traits of really successful founders, and not it doesn't have to be a startup in all of these different businesses. And yeah, my parents, my dad was an engineer, my mom was a journalist, and they started a bagel shop. So I grew up grew up in the bagel shop. But I mean, watching my mom and my aunt with they have a market research company now, and grandfather had an own small business. One of the things that I think solves most problems is just a willingness to keep trying. Um, and it's the kind of grit and perseverance. And I just more and more I've realized, you can have, you know, a field of 100 incredibly smart people. But if there's someone who's just willing to keep going, like at some point you find a way through. And that above all else seems to be the quality of I think people I've found that are successful and able to kind of take things to the next level.
My grandfather ran a hotel. My dad ran a furniture store, and ups and downs of the economy and various challenges throughout the years, but you keep fighting, and find a way. So I think that resonates. And Quinn, through your journey, you're an author.
So I co-wrote a book with my one of my best friends, Swish Goswami, and the premise of the book, it's called Youth Entrepreneurship. And what we wanted to write, we both started a variety of different things while we were in school. So I had originally been working on a telehealthcare company in Southeast Asia, Bangladesh. Um, and that opportunity kind of arose through school and pursued it. So I was flying between Toronto, where I was at University of Toronto, and Dhaka, to meet with the government and set up contracts and set up these health centers. Um, and Swish was, building his own company, or more than one at some points through college. Um, and the what we wanted to essentially build a case for was there are many incredible books by more successful entrepreneurs on how to build massive, startups or businesses. But what we felt like there was less of, particularly in Canada, was a perspective on why being in school and being young is actually an incredible advantage and opportunity to pursue these sorts of things. And maybe that's starting a nonprofit, maybe that's trying to start your own business, small business, startup, it doesn't matter. But what we wanted to build a case for was there are few times in your life where there is as little risk uh, as you face in the context of school. And there is a kind of this advantage of at least trying to do that at that period of your life. And ideally, it becomes a viable career option for people in a way that, they look towards, medicine or engineering or law. Part of the inspiration here is just, I feel like when someone realizes that they can actually have an effect on the world, like that you can be, part of the change, that you can build something new, that you can change how things are done, you realize that it's not that there's nothing truly special about the people that are doing that except that they are trying. If we had more people that came to that realization and felt that way, it would just be to everyone's benefit.
You're young, you have your life in front of you, and you can take a shot. And it doesn't come without risk. That's entrepreneurship, right? I mean, the worst that happens is you fall flat on your face and you fail. But hopefully you learn a heck ton from it and you get back up and you're better for it.
So, part of the thing that we told ourselves was, you know what, even if this doesn't work out, like we have met these incredible people through the work that we're doing, and we've shown that we're willing to like take initiative and try to solve hard problems. And who doesn't want that person working on their team? I think it's part of why you see, businesses like Stripe that try to hire founders almost exclusively because they wanted that as part of their culture, because they knew that it didn't matter if the thing they were working on didn't work out or not. But there is a perspective on life, a grittiness and a willingness to take the initiative and go out and solve those hard problems that they wanted in their culture. And so I think, this is one of the things we tried to say was, at the end of the day, the worst case scenario is not that bad.
Amazing. A topic I'm very passionate about. I think that if you have more young people trying to solve big problems in a world that is increasingly more complex, as technology, the rate of innovation consistently increases, we're more interconnected than ever. You need people who are thinking big and taking shots. So kudos for you for writing a book and helping people to be able to, take those shots.
My goal has always been to balance, having a positive impact on people and doing that at scale. And if I can say that the work that I've done has meaningfully shaped, people's quality of life, their health, in a direct and hopefully lasting way, then I am deeply satisfied. So I hope that this is the start of that. That's what I want to keep doing, and go from there.
That's awesome. Quinn, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. This was a ton of fun, and look forward to speaking with you soon.